I've got some new people in. Okay. So I'm just going to start bringing everyone into the conversation. And because today is a discussion.
Okay. Hello, Julian. Hello, everybody. Who is here? Okay.
I'm still in the process of getting everyone into the show. Okay. Good.
Oh, my,
Video work.
My hair.
Yeah, a little water on it.
So did everyone read the article?
No. Which? I feel like a student coming to class unprepared. Which article?
ArtNet. I will post a link in just a second. Let me grab it off of my screen. Where do I have this?
Guck, wie jetzt alle.
I will put this in the chats. There's Brian. The major reason I do this via the webinar is because in case I ever get somebody who's just in here being annoying, I can just like kick them out. Yeah, because when I started, I never really knew who and how and which direction this is going to go. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Julian.
So, has everyone read the article? No.
Didn't see it. I'm looking at it.
I'll put it on full screen if you want to.
Would you want to read it out loud, Julian?
Sure. We'll fill about 10 minutes of time. Daniel Hoog speaking, the director of Art Cologne. Everyone knows who he is, I assume, or at least knows what Art Cologne is and the importance of his position.
Yeah.
Of course.
I start.
It's this little local art fair.
Exactly, it's this tiny little fair in Cologne. Started last year. This week, we will receive new guidelines from the German government about how to operate a trade show in the age of COVID-19. I can only guess at this point, but I imagine trading our packed vernissage for 2 days of private viewing for VIPs and staggered time slots for the public. I expect restricted online ticket sales, widened aisles, an ample supply of masks, and single direction visitor flow. In other words, we will be regulating how, when, and under what circumstances people can view the art at our fair. With the right precautionary measures, physical fairs will take place again. But I fear the age of global travel will be severely impeded for several years to come. However, this shift doesn't mean the death of art fairs. It just means a reinvention of them, or perhaps more accurately, a return to their roots. A history lesson. It is worthwhile to look back to the time when the first art fair was invented. Art Cologne was founded in 1967 by the gallerists Rudolf Zwirner and Heinrich Stünke, who formed an association with 16 German art dealers, including ArtNet's founder Hans Neuendorf. They presented what they termed in German progressive Kunst, progressive art. and the Kölner Kunstmarkt, now known as Art Cologne, was born. Interestingly, it was formed in response to a crisis. The market for contemporary art had grown stagnant in West Germany. The founders were inspired by the second Documenta and felt a large commercial gallery-focused event might reinvigorate commerce. They were surprised by their success. More than 1 million Deutsche Mark were generated during the fair's 5-day run. For comparison, at that time, a brand new VW Beetle cost 5,150 Deutsche Mark, about 3 times the price of a decent-sized Gerhard Richter oil painting. By the time I became the fair's second director in 2008, however, Art Cologne had fallen on hard times and was no longer the fashionable destination it was in the 1980s. Despite all this, I was fascinated by the fact that it still managed to draw 35,000 visitors, and many of the more than 200 exhibiting galleries had moderate or good sales. It is nearly impossible to extract precise figures from dealers, but around 90% say they found the results satisfactory. Although the global players were largely missing in 2008, the fair still served its core purpose. My goal was not to reinvent the art fair, but to build upon what was already there, to reduce the size, restructure it, and to bring it into the present. What I've learned in over a decade since taking over Art Cologne is that a market which only caters to the super rich will leave little to no legacy. Art becomes a mere luxury good. And while previous attempts to revitalize the fair relied upon competing with Art Basel or newbies like Frieze, where the focus was largely on commercial art, on contemporary art, excuse me, I decided to focus on the German market, specifically the evolution of the German art market from 1900 until today. Strength of the margins. Today, Germany has around 1,000 commercial galleries, nearly half of which are in Berlin, followed by between 50 to 100 in each of the major cities throughout Germany. Unlike the United States, where galleries are clustered on the coasts, Germany has a gallery system with dealers in every major city across the country. There are plenty of global players like Spruth Magers, Nagel Draxler, Daniel Buchholz, Johann König, Eigen und Art, and others. But it is the countless other galleries operating in Germany, particularly outside of the art centers, that are the German art world's true backbone. They are a doorway for countless people when they first enter the market and the stewards of established collectors across Germany. Notably, the barrier between regular people and art collectors is often blurred in this country. Most art buyers are professionals, doctors, dentists, and lawyers. There are few art consultants, and art prices tend to not exceed 150,000 euro. It's about $161,000. In a time of closed borders and self-reliance, it is precisely these local galleries and collectors from the surrounding regions that will help the art market survive. Art fairs today will, for the most part, be able to operate only on a regional level, considering that the time of global travel is, for at least the time being, over. Germany is well set up for this. Arts and culture in Germany are considered essential and are well supported. Normal upper middle class people across Germany travel to Cologne once a year and buy some contemporary art. The widening gap between the poor and the rich and the gradual disappearance of the middle class in the United States could spell the end of the contemporary art market there, where it will no longer have any relevance to normal people, not even the social climbers. So, it is imperative that the art market sustainably supports well-to-do professionals in acquiring art. Otherwise, we will make ourselves obsolete as an industry. There is evidence that if you cultivate this local audience, they will come. 2 years after I took over Art Cologne in 2010, the Icelandic volcano Eyjafjallajökull, excuse me, Gesundheit, erupted,
Nobody can speak
For
by
the
sign.
BNP preview. Air traffic came to a halt, and we had more than 400 cancellations from our international VIPs. Despite this disaster, sales took place as usual. I still don't know for sure if the inability to travel brought more people from Greater Europe, or if it forced bored Europeans to come visit the fair. Only about 2% of the 400 cancellations ever returned over the following years. Yet we continued to experience success. So what does the future hold? This March, we decided to postpone the next edition of our Cologne to November. Of this year's 175 exhibitors, about 45% come from Germany. Even if we miraculously manage to contain the virus globally by the end of the summer, and there's no second wave in the fall, I'm expecting only the Europeans to show up this November. And it's likely that the EU will place travel restrictions on people coming from Asia, Russia, and the Americas. In any case, the nerve to call an American art fair with 75% American galleries international, while referring to a fair like Art Cologne with 50% galleries from Germany as regional, is a falsehood bred by American exceptionalism. But hopefully, as when Art Cologne was first founded, art fairs of the future will have an actual purpose and fill a need that is not easily replaced by a move to the virtual. In the end, I am confident that people who love and value art need museums, art fairs, art associations, and the experience of personal contact with a wide range of galleries. Once COVID-19 is over, I am convinced that we will return to art fairs and large public gatherings. Online art fairs miss the point, which is human exchange, meeting and discussing, drinking and eating dinner together. We know people will behave differently come autumn, and that visitors may avoid packed booths or opt to drop by those with fewer visitors. This might just be a silver lining. What is certain, either way, is that this moment has made us reevaluate how important culture truly is. It is impossible to reflect the entire global art world in a single fair. All fairs are, in fact, regional, and have always been, and always will be. No fair is simply big enough to accurately reflect the cultural production from around the entire globe, even if it is online and therefore essentially borderless. After looking at 45 galleries on Frieze New York's online platform, I burned out to a point of no return. When we try to make every fair the same, all the same galleries, all the same artists and artworks, we have the potential to overlook truly important art. By restoring fairs to their original purpose of promoting their local communities, local artists, and local collectors, those stalwarts who were always there anyways, we can make sure the titans of the future are not lost. Amen.
Amen.
Yeah, so there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. You know, first off, Daniel speaking specifically to the importance of the regional, which I've mentioned numerous times over this, the duration of this show. And also the fact that the large affairs have kind of all become, parallel universes, like carbon copies of each other in a certain degree, where people try, or the fairs try and one up each other for a very particular kind of immediately accessible visceral experience, as opposed to engaging in the work. And of course, all of the fairs have people who are there to help explain the art, but nobody really goes to the fairs to understand the art. So I thought that this was a really interesting time for this essay to be published. Art Basel has been moved to September, At least that's the current schedule. A bunch of other fairs have been canceled. TAFAF was cut in half, basically, because it was still running when the entire pandemic started. So what are your guys' thoughts on this? No thought.
Well, I know Art Basel, I know Art Cologne, and then of course Paris Photo and Art Miami a little bit, and its little branches, in Southampton and so. Um, it's what I find a little bit disappointing always is it's always the same galleries and it's basically always the same stuff. Yeah, that's how I felt. But my expectation when I'm going to an art fair in Art Southampton, which was a branch of Art Miami, yeah, it was a little bit like this, that the local artist or the artist of this region were actually shown, and they're given a platform. And I find that really, really cool. I find, on this art fairs, it's like the galleries are showing the big names, the most expensive paintings or art pieces, and that's what it became. It's not a collection of, okay, this is what the art world is today. Yeah, and that's a little bit my expectation on an art fair, and I hope if it goes back to a little bit more local, I'm totally for that. Yeah. I don't see anything yet.
Coming from a gallerist's point of view, and the the kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't cycle of the art fairs is if you don't, or if you didn't do them, we're going into brand new territory, so I'll speak in the past and assume that the future is going to be much different than what we've had anyway, which I think is apparent. If you didn't, go to the fairs and do the, present the work there, then you almost didn't exist, because there was so much pressure to be at the fair and to go there as a collector and to go to one fair after the next, this constant barrage, this, chain. I mean, you knew where everyone was. You could, if you wanted to have a meeting with somebody, you just need to book a room in the same hotel during the fair that you knew they were going to. And that's kind of crazy. And we as gallerists, we got stuck in this, marketing rut of, if we don't do this, we don't exist. And then we run into the issue of, square footage at a fair. Like Paris Photo costs me between 50 and 80,000 euro a year at fair for a week. And I do a lot of stuff on my own.
How much?
50 to 80,000, depending on the architecture and the lighting and special features and shipping. And, which means that at the fair, I've got 5 days to make, if we take 50,000 as the number, I've got 5 days to sell 100,000 in art to break even.
Yeah.
Like literally to not pay on top. Now, I've always seen the fairs as more of an advertising expense, because I don't do I don't do stuff that works at fairs. I do stuff that works for intelligent people at fairs. And there's a couple of well, I mean, I'm not saying that most people are stupid, but I'm like, people come to my stand to look at what I'm showing because they understand that I've put thought into it. That I don't just put pictures on the wall, that I actually consider How do the pictures communicate with each other? What's the topic of the stand? You know, what's the literature that I have that's backing that up? How am I building the entire experience? And I do that every time, bar none. I've never been to a fair where I haven't considered every single picture. And it hasn't helped sales, you know, because first off, I have expensive stuff, and second off, you know, people, I don't know, I've got this theory that people don't want to remove pictures from the construct that I've built because it becomes a whole construct. And if you take something out of it, you break it, you know?
Yeah, it's a risk.
Yeah. You know, and I've seen some stands where it's just like, oh, let's just put these pictures together, which like completely do not belong together at all. And I go back like 2 days later, and both of them are sold. I'm like, that is so rude. That's just absolutely wrong. Yeah, whatever. So, but that's just me griping. I'm venting.
So do you think that model though of going toward the local would actually draw a different type of viewer and a different type of potential customer? And do you think that would be better for sales in the end?
Well, if we take what Jan put into the conversation already, that all the fairs were the same, and we say, okay, we're going to make the fairs different necessarily because they're regionally based, and not every region has every artist, so they have to be different because it's not just, you know, one box of pictures traveling from one fair to the next, as some colleagues sometimes do. You know, I think it has that potential, but it also means that we're talking about a kind of a shift in what we value in the fairs. And that's one of the things that I think will be happening, and I'm hoping will be happening, is that people will be returning to looking at the art. You know, I've mentioned this before. It's, you know, not so much about the hoopla and the she, because everyone's scared to be close to each other now. So maybe, and we've all had a whole bunch of time to sit and consider what it is that we're doing and what we're not, and all, maybe we have gained some attention span, like we've kind of refilled our attention span tank to be able to dig into some work and look at it and engage with it, and to understand that it's from like from Cologne or from Germany means that you can come back to Germany and it becomes an identity. This is the fair. Art Cologne becomes the fair, which is heavily focused on German 20th century and 21st century art. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And the major galleries, like the really big, you know, the top five, they all, you know, they'll continue to do the cycle and travel from one fair to the other because the fairs need that and the exchange is needed. And it's also good for them to be able to pick up artists and contacts in a different context. And of course, they have work which can fit very well into that kind of focus. So, you know, I hope that it'll go there. Sorry. Always got to check if I've got a client pinging me or not. That was not a client.
So in the fairs though, traditionally it's been oriented, as you're saying, I think, to blue chip artists, right, and not really, you know, these are not really opportunities for emerging artists or people who are not really well known to show their work because there's not any incentive in that, right? There's not, because of the value of the work isn't there, it hasn't been established.
Yeah, that's a tough. It's like a daisy chain of problems. The first problem is that the unknown artist, inherently their market price being undefined because no one is really bought it, and it hasn't popped up at any auctions or anything, or there's no records, basically nothing that someone can quantify it with, are a risk purchase for anybody who is conscious of money. For collectors who buy stuff because they love it, they're going to do that anyway. It doesn't much matter. It just needs to be inside of the amount of money they can spend. And there are those people, but that doesn't make up the larger portion of the art market. So, and then you've got galleries who would then show this new work, and they're running a big risk, because to do a fair, and again, I'll quote the 50 grand, if I have to sell 100,000 of art by artists who are completely unknown, if I'm selling them 1,000 a piece, I have to sell 100 pictures in 5 days. That's 20 pictures a day. The fair is actually sellably active for 3 hours a day, which is a rough average of what it really is before the audience, like the general public, comes in, and not much really happens. That means that I have 15 hours to sell those pictures in total over a 5-day fair. And that becomes then prohibitive for the gallery. And this is one of the reasons why I'm so invested in the software that I'm building, because what it does is it shows you what's happening without it being registered inside of a large pay-to-play structure like an art fair or a marketing system, like whatever these public lists. And because then during the fair, and I've mentioned this before, during a fair or during any major event, an artist could do an open studio, and people who are interested could then find the open studio through the platform. Of course, everyone needs to adopt using the platform, but there may be a way to make that happen. If you discover that you can go to Art Cologne and see the 75 exhibitors there, plus another 30 or 40 artists who are doing open studios for a given week, then it may be a very viable option. And not only in Cologne, but like in any other place. So, I'm going to post a this is what I've been working on of recent.
Your comments got me thinking about where I live. The town where I live's in South Carolina, Greenville. Not a huge city, but growing, very international population. BMW is here, and they have for its size in this area, I would say in the southeastern United States, a very large art festival every year that was canceled. It's called Artisphere, and it usually draws the type of artist who would go on the circuit of art fairs and festivals in that region or across the country. And one of the things that came up when this festival first came to the city was that, this would be great for the arts. People would buy, Greenville would become known as a place where artists can show their work and this kind of thing. But what happened was the politics of it cut out really good local artists who could benefit enormously by participating in that kind of art fair. And there was almost like a conscious effort to deflect. And it's the people who were designing it really were going in the wrong direction. They were saying, we want to draw artists from outside. And then my thought back to them was, well, if you do that, then those people are going to be gone at the end of the festival, and you're still going to have the same local artists who are producing good work, who need to be seen and need a forum. And what happens to them after the festival is gone, and after all the people with the money buying the art are gone? You really need something that's more sustainable. And I think over time they tried to build that in, but I think that's with towns that size, and I'm not talking about major art fairs, but but more local, more regional, and even on that level, it's a problem.
Yeah, that's too bad. I mean, whoever was planning that was probably um, thinking to solve a problem and not realizing what the secondary problems that come with it are. That's yeah, that's too bad. But those kind of things. That's exactly what Daniel was talking about in his article. These smaller fairs, the whatever town squares where people hang their 5 canvases underneath the tarp to make sure they don't get wet and try and sell them for whatever they can get for them. That's part of what really keeps the basis of the art market running. And all of the artists out there, they all started as children with crayons or something similar. And so it's really impossible to see who's going to be the one who catches the insight that's going to change the way people see the world in the future. And there's as much luck involved with that as there is good intent, and the way all the parts fit together.
I mean, Julian, I'm just thinking all the time here right now, how it was for me. I was an unknown, and I'm still an unknown little photographer from back then. It was Saxony, now in Bavaria, and then I had the luck being introduced to a big gallery in Munich, and a week later my pictures basically were at Paris Photo. Yeah. And left of me, of my picture, I had 6 of my images there, and then on the left hand side was Irving Penn, and on the right hand side was Nick Brandt with his wildlife stuff, And I thought, man, people not gonna look at Schlegel, it's the Irving Penns are strong and the Nick Brandt is strong here. It was this huge elephant and so on, and then I think it was 6 or 8 of my prints, and I was very nervous. This was first time really art fair, and the first day at Paris Photo is always the VIP day, as you know.
Yeah.
I was not allowed to go in back then, so next day I went, and the gallery's lady, she was waiting nervously on the booth already, and said, "Yeah, Jan, the people are coming into my booth not because of the Irving Penns here, or not because of Nick Brandt here. Yeah, it's the pictures. These are the magnets." And then I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, 11 pictures are sold already. And I said, "Wow, this is crazy." So and then she said, it's people are looking for something new, and and they found it refreshing, that it is not always, and it's a bigger gallery in Germany, and a pretty well known back then. And she said it's people are interested in something new, and then also the price. Of course, mine was not like Irving Penn or Nick Brandt, back then, edition number 1 was 2,200 euro. And she said the majority of people that come to the art fair, they cannot purchase an Irving Penn. They are not able to pay for that, or a Nick Brandt who started, I think it was 40,000 back then, yeah. But she said yours is so affordable, and people are interested in new artists. She said she never experienced it so strongly, and and I think this for me, showed it pretty well. The art fair or the galleries, or the art fair, they need both. They need the Irving Penns. I always go to Paris Photo because I want to see the old masters. I want to see Irving Penks. I want to see August Sander, you know, all of them. But I'm also interested in the new stuff that maybe I could afford. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, you're speaking again, or you're speaking to another point that Daniel was making is that regionality in its diversity uh, gives space for that kind of experience. And Brian, you had said in when I hang pictures on the wall in my gallery, I give them a form of pedigree just by sheer fact that I hang them, and the way I hang them, because I choose to put beside each other, that does, at least at the moment of exhibition, give a certain weight and import to the images that are there. And Jan, in your case, being framed by you know, two well-established masters, is of course, you know, I mean, they could have gotten down on one knee and had a sword slapped on your shoulder. About as good as it gets. You know? And I can see why they would do that. I mean, the aesthetics, the you know, from the videos I've seen from on Instagram and from your homepage, the aesthetic quality of your prints matches very well inside of that kind of that dialect of photography, if you will. And you know, giving people the opportunity to step into that, to see something that they love, that they're passionate about, and then have it be affordable, makes, you know, it enforces the buyer's understanding that their taste is good and they're being rewarded for it, and that's a great thing. I mean, that's a win for everybody. You know, so congratulations, that's a great story. Yeah.
So I think, you know, it needs both. You know, we need the well-established, the big names. I want them to be there. You know, I cannot imagine a Paris photo without the big names. You know.
Yeah.
But I want to see the new stuff. You know, and this is what a fair should be about, in my opinion. You know, the new local stuff. You know, and for Paris photo, the new European stuff. Yeah. And I'm. Yeah. So if there, I feel like Paris photo became so commercial. Well, of course it's a fair, it is commercial, but it's so expensive for the galleries, you know. And my gallery said, you know, Jan, we need to make bigger prints. You need to make bigger prints because you know, I need to pay 40,000 at the end for the fair. Yeah, and so if you have a big print that's 12,000, I'm getting easier to my 40,000. You know, so they said it became so commercial, and the thinking of how they curated their booth, you know, and everything was just wow. Okay, let's, like advertisement, you know.
You know, I mean, let's discuss the entire cost point, because that's an important topic, which I know a lot of gallerists are interested in. And I think it's also good for artists to know what that's about. Like, you know, where does that money go? Because, you know, the first time I told some of my artists how much it costs to do a fair, you know, some of them didn't believe me. I had to show them the bills. Like, you're shitting me, right? That's a joke. You're just trying to screw me over. Like, no, here. So Paris photo is, of course, very expensive because it's in the Grand Palais. The rent on that property for the 2 weeks that they need to have it, you know, including setup, actually, I think it's like 2.5 to 3 weeks between setup and tear down and the fair itself. That's an extraordinarily expensive piece of property. So they roll that over, of course, onto the galleries. Then they have the entire infrastructure, both mechanical and service, as well as the staffing and all of that. So that gets rolled over. Then they have sponsors who put money in, which makes it a little less expensive for us, like JP Morgan, like BMW, who have been there, both have been there for quite a while, and there's a number of other sponsors who I can't remember by name, but and I'm grateful to all of them. Any money that we get to help support that, I think, is a good thing. And the last bit of money they're making is through selling food at ridiculous prices, like a hot dog for €7, and ticket sales, where people stand outside in lines around the corner. Now, you can imagine in the next year, in November, when Photo happens again, if it happens again, and it's in the same place as planned, they're not going to have more than 20% of those ticket sales. That's also going to turn into only 20% of the food sales, because people aren't going to eat 5 times as much because they get through the line faster. They're just going to eat, it's going to be the same kind of per person average. So that means that the fair is losing money. So what's the option to fix that? One is to charge the galleries, but the galleries can't pay for that because we just spent the last, in November, we've spent 11 months probably making no money or very little money, which means that there's a very real chance a bunch of people won't even go. There's going to be like, I can't afford that. I don't care how cheap it is. I can't afford it. Now, Macron could come in, or somebody from the Cultural Institute in France, and say, okay, this is important for us. Freeze here and this, and the Christian Dior show, all these things that happen in the Grand Palais are important, and they need to happen. So we're going to support it with money. That's theoretically possible, but again, none of that is making a real dent in the actual problem. And that transferred then just briefly to the situation that Daniel's going to be dealing with in November, is exactly the same. And he was very clear about it, what he's expecting. And I know this is probably going to be true because my wife, as a teacher, has been implementing exactly those kind of protocols in the school for the students, that they have one-way streets, meaning they have, staircases where you can go up and staircases you can go down. And if you forgot your pencil downstairs, well, you're shit out of luck. It's a long walk. So that means that all that experience, all that secondary income that makes that kind of thing function is gone, or most of it is gone. And to support the galleries, it would be really helpful for us to not pay so much. But then we end up with the tab. Who pays for it? And that's kind of the quandary now. How does that work? How do you do that? I mean, art cologne is, for me, it's nowhere near as expensive as Photo because it's down the street. I mean, we joke we could bring our entire fair stand to the fair with the streetcar. If the pictures are small enough, we just put them in boxes, take a streetcar over and hang them. Shipping cost, 0, or €1.90 for the tram ticket. But it's still the fare, the staff, the insurance, all those things are still in place. And that's one of these big reckoning questions whereas I agree with Daniel that the regional fair, if the art fair is going to survive, it's going to survive by shrinking to regional, to be able to connect to an audience that can reach it and that can feel secure enough to go to it, because they don't have to cross the abyss of danger of the COVID-19 after effect abyss of getting in an airplane and worrying, spending 8 hours worrying because somebody in the line while getting onto the plane coughed into your neck accidentally. That kind of thing. But that, that's not going to be easy for the fairs. I mean, this is, and we have a saying, der Wahl zwischen Cholera und der Pest. And this is kind of cholera with medicine. It doesn't really, it's a tough situation. And the one thing that I felt was really positive about it was that he was focused, as I have been since this whole situation has started, on the reinvigoration of the local art markets. That like even Greenville, it doesn't, Greenville's not Soho in New York, or well, Soho's not an art center anymore, but it's not like downtown New York or the Meatpacking or Chelsea or whatever, but it's got its thing. And, as Daniel clearly stated, Germany's filled with these little things. I know my father, he keeps buying paintings at Pokans, at flea markets, because that's where these people, they inherit a bunch of stuff, they take it to the flea market and they sell it. And my dad goes and he's been buying beautiful paintings for like, 10, 20 euro. And he sends them off to his restorer, has them all prepped and cleaned and framed. So he's got another 100 euro in them. And you look at them, they're gorgeous. Things from the 19th century or late 18th century where the owners have no idea what it is or what it's worth. He just goes in and buys. And, if he finds one really valuable piece by doing that, he's paid for his entire collection. So there is that market, and it's all this regional kind of, small world thing. And I was, happy to see that Daniel was pointing to that, and I'm hoping that that article gets read by a lot of people and very often, so that people understand that that may be a real way to bring it back. And in the future, it can become a way of experiencing the art world, which is a counterpoint to Jan's griping earlier about every fair being, and not just Jan's griping. I think all of us have experienced this. Anyone who's gone to 3 or 4 fairs in a single year will at some point realize that it's in larger parts the same material or the same-ish material.
So, okay, Julian, I have a question. For me, as a photographer or artist, Paris photo was crucial, because this is how I got, how my gallery built up my name a little bit,
Yes.
And they built it not up only in Germany through that, or not only in France, but international, yeah? So for me, being part of Paris Photo or any international fair helps me to being recognized, being built up, being if the art fair ends up being very local, yeah. So how would this affect me as a photographer, as an artist, being kind of built up?
Well, before the internet and the jet set art market, there was newspaper and press. And so people would write about fairs or exhibitions. And that was one of the primary ways that it happened. What would happen is, you would have an exhibition in Ulm. So Ulm would have an exhibition. And somebody from New York Times, was in Europe doing on a reporting gig, and then would go by and look at the show. And then they would write about it. And then the customers would then come to the gallerist of their, who they trust, das Galeristen des Vertrauens, sorry, it's a literal translation there, and say, hey, have you heard about this? Do you know anything about this?
Mm-hmm.
And then the gallerist would, get on the horn and, start making calls and figuring out what it is and who has it. And it would then become kind of develop into a conversation. And at some point, then either the work you'd get slides or whatever. So, all the mechanics aren't that important. What I'm trying to point at is that in the globalization and the international fair scene, we've lost some very important players on the road, some very important positions and filters. And, with the destruction of print media, and the devaluing of authorship, meaning that critics just aren't paid as much as they used to be. They're not valued as highly, their opinion isn't valued as highly as it was. In part also because a lot of the press releases or a lot of the articles are written actually by the press department of the galleries. And I know this is the case because the reviewers get no money. And so if they can get a finished text and all they have to do is change 3 sentences to make it their own, they're going to do it because they don't even have to think about it. Like they fly over it, oh, this is cool, boom, out it goes. And we get a homogenized communication platform.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, this is me dreaming. What I would see as an ideal world is that the people who go to the fairs and the internet presentation thereof, which in a way can replace the print media, not fully, because you can't put a homepage on your shelf and look at it 30 years later, unless you print it out and organize it in a way that you understand what it is you're looking at. The physically printed magazine or newspaper had the advantage that it was a container of context. But that caveat by the wayside, that people writing about it, things like Instagram, where people who are locals, you get like the Cologne guy, like whatever, the Cologne art guy, whoever that is, the Cologne art girl, somebody who just loves art and hangs out in Cologne and just kind of buzzes around and checks stuff out and posts it on Instagram. And it becomes kind of a replacement critical communication channel. Of course, I would prefer to have people actually write critical texts, like saying, hey, I love this picture, or I really don't like it, or it's not for me. It's well done, it's just not for me. That kind of giving it a human face again. And that can then bring back this entire process of communicating about the arts, a lot of which has gotten lost because of the speed of the global art market, the travel schedule, and the fact that everyone's really only looking to buy names because it's all kind of formulated anyway, or much of it is. And not to step on your feet in any way, but the fact that your work was placed between Brandt and Penn, and it was recognized as that, is kind of a witness to that. It doesn't devalue your work in any way, but it is witness to that fact that it's a language that, like I said, a dialect, I think is the right word. There's a manner to your work which is pleasing to some eyes, to certain eyes, to people who love that. And those people found it in your work, which is awesome. But it's something that it's not quantifiable, but you understand what I'm saying? It's really difficult to say that without sounding like an asshole. So
Totally. Yeah. I get it.
Because it's no critique at all. I love your pictures. I really do.
Thank you.
So it's, but there's that thing, you see it with, like, Robert Frank has a style of photography, and a lot of people copied that. And, we're out doing or street photography in general is that whole thing, investigative street photography. And yeah, anyway. So I don't know, does that answer the question?
Yep. So what is your hope, Julian, as a gallerist?
What is my hope?
For the art fairs. Do you want it to become local?
I would like the art fairs to be less pretentious. Mm-hmm. I'm not so worried about the local. I think invariably they will become large again. But there's a lot of money spent on things that have nothing to do with art. And I find that really intrusive because I'm the one paying for it, basically.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and if collectors coming there can't come there to buy art and can't deal with not having whatever, you know, €5 hit sushi in mass production and champagne and, you know, beautiful hostesses all dancing around, tingling and being bubbly for them. If they can't deal with being there for the art, then they probably shouldn't be there.
Good
And
point.
you know, I think if we can change the conversation around the art, the reason why we're there, the reason why we're looking at it, and why we're engaging with it, then you know that's what I would hope that we use this to change the way the conversation goes. You know, Daniel wrote that the experience digitally doesn't work because it doesn't include meetings and sitting down and having dinner together. That having dinner together is such an important part of this process. When clients come to the gallery and look at work, or when when you're at a fair and you say, okay, what are we doing after the show? And then you go out together with a bunch of friends and you're all just completely like just wonky tired from the first day at the fair, and you've got a bunch of clients there and it's all and everyone's laughing and enjoying discussing and
Yeah.
that's where the community comes from, and that's the community that builds the art market. And it's not made just of the galleries in the blue chip galleries with the big stands. It's also made of the interns who were working at some other gallery and got lucky and got to join in, and they got to then have an experience sitting at a table with the greats. I've had dinner with some extraordinary people in my lifetime, and I've been deeply enriched by all of those experiences. And I count myself lucky for having been able to have done that over my life. That's what feeds my interest in the mediums, and that needs to come back.
Yeah, totally agree.
All of that, the pretension is driven by price, and you can't afford all of that if you're selling €500 pieces.
Right.
Nobody can. So that drives the price up just of necessity if you're going to have all of that accompanying. So the answer is not to bring in local artists that you can sell for $500 or euros or whatever. But again, I don't know, to have what you're talking about, there's got to be a lot of money involved. That's the dog chasing his tail here.
Well, I was reading an article about a portfolio or a story about a gallerist and their makings. And what became very clear is that of all the major gallerists, almost all of them came with money to the game.
Sure.
One of the very few, and he's one of the most reviled among them, is Larry Gagosian, he's a self-made man. I met him, that was interesting. A conversation of maybe 30 seconds. But he knew exactly who I was, knew exactly who I was related to. Very kind, very straightforward, spoke a few words with me, thanked me for being there, and then moved on.
Yeah, I worked for him when he was selling posters in LA and had a loft in Soho and had somebody showing art there before he even moved to New York. I mean, he was hustling back in the day. And this was what, about 76, 77 when he was doing that? Like, yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
But the dilemma here is that art is driven by money. And it takes about the same effort to sell something for $10,000 as it's going to sell for $1,000.
Yep.
There's another piece for $1,000. So why sell $1,000 pieces if you can sell $10,000 pieces? Yep. And that's always the problem with the problem with dealers is that they've got to sell expensive stuff. So I'm going, all right, so just sell mine for 10,000. You know, it's like, well, that doesn't work either, does it?
Yeah, there's a process.
I mean, the future of the fairs is also going to be dependent upon governments, because it's going to have to be subsidized. And I think there's a greater opportunity in Europe where there's much more respect for the arts than there is in the States, especially with our current president. You know, Merkel is supportive of the arts. I think in France, you've got a lot more support of the arts, and the fairs might go on with government subsidy for a while.
Well, it's a $63 billion business.
Yeah.
Worldwide. And about half of that is auction sales. The other half is gallery sales or direct sales.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money, for a relatively small microcosm of people involved in it. Now, according to my statistics from my software analysis, there's about 8,000 galleries worldwide, or something like that, which are worth discussing. I'm not talking about, the thing, a tiny little pop-up gallery, which then closes in 3 months because the guy or girl who ran it got bored, but people who are really in it to try and make a living or do something meaningful. So we've got $63 billion being turned over by a handful of auction houses and about 8,000 galleries, and then a significantly larger list of artists, of course. There's enough money in this market to make it worthwhile. It's very strongly split right now because a lot of people are buying based on pedigree. They'll buy from an Ivan Bill, they'll buy from a Larry Gagosian, they'll buy from a David Selma because they bring the pedigree of knowing what they're talking about. They have proven themselves as the dealers who know exactly what it is that they're talking about. And when they sell you a picture and they say, you should buy this picture because this picture is great and it's going to be great for your collection, it's going to be great for you financially in the long run, buy it. And somebody opens their purse and pulls out $1 million. Boom, and buys it. And the smaller galleries fight hard to get that pedigree, and a lot of them can't because they don't have the chutzpah to actually develop the pedigree. You can't do that by ever challenging or changing the principles by which you do this. If you start shifting and jumping about because the market is doing this or that, then at some point you'll really become the dog that's wagged by the tail. And then you have no pedigree. Then all you are is a dealer, and you could be selling bottlenecks or hubcaps or plates, because it all becomes just products. And it's a challenge. It's the ever-running challenge of continuing to require myself to love what I do, which means that I have to do shows that I love, or at least that I believe in. And I'm not the only one who fights with this. I just have the extraordinary advantage that I have such a large collection of work that I can pull stuff from that I would never need to borrow a piece of art from anybody ever again. I could spend the rest of my life curating shows from the existing collection of work I have. Don't want to do that, no worries. But it's a great luxury. Bit of a burden, but a great luxury all the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, what do I hope for? Less pretentiousness. Yeah, that's pretentious.
That's a good word. That's good. I like that.
It's I don't know, it's a small d democratizing the art world too. A little bit of that. I was friends with a gallery owner in Brooklyn, Joe Amron, who ran a gallery called Pierogi. And he had a space in this gallery and decided early on that he wasn't going to try to participate in any of the art fairs. And at that point, it would have been some of the smaller ones. But he created a flat file for work geared especially for young curators and collectors who could come into his gallery at any point, and basically it was an archive. It was well cataloged. They could go through it. They could see what the price points were. They could go to the type of art and the type of price point that they were drawn to, and it was a really cool experience to be able to sample lots of different kinds of work. And some of the people were reasonably well known, not huge names, but reasonably well known in New York anyway. And that flat file started to travel, and he was shipping it to other places across the country, and eventually wound up in the when people really began to take notice of it was when it wound up in the Young Curators collection at their sort of collecting club at the MoMA. That's when he started getting coverage for it. But the price points remained the same. I mean, it was all supposed to be work that people could afford, and maybe some more of that will come into play.
Yeah.
It cost a lot of money to ship it, and you can still put work out that fits for certain people's buying for their pocketbook.
I was thinking about doing a 36 hours exhibition at the end of August. I just need to get some people to help me because I can't stay awake for 36 hours without massive amounts of drugs.
I'll drive up and help, no problem.
Cool. Y'all know the 36 hours story? Walter Hobbs? He had a space in Washington, D.C. And he said he's going to do a show called 36 Hours where the gallery is going to be open for 36 hours and anybody can bring a piece of art in and it'll be hung on the wall. And if someone wants to buy it, they'll sell it and they'll split the money. And the building was full by the end. Like everything. You know, there were curious stories, like apparently some guy living on the street came in completely tanked and wanted to make a joke of it, brought some porno pictures with him. They'd ripped out of like the Hustler or something, and said, and it's like signed them or something, you know, whatever. And said, "This is my art. I want to hang this." And so the Hops took the work to the back of the space, hung it on the wall. Darkest corner you could find, but he hung it. And the gallery didn't close for 36 hours.
That's a cool concept. I've come.
Yeah, you know, I think it'd be an interesting thing to do.
Yeah.
Like, I'd need probably like 36 hours. You do 6-hour shifts. Yeah, you need 6 people or 5 people. Because I could do the first shift and the last shift. And then it'd be like a 36-hour of Le Mans kind of thing.
Hey, Julian, I need to go. I say goodbye to everybody.
Yep, I'm gonna close out now anyway.
Okay, bye.
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 Richard, give me a call.
I was just about to share my thoughts after listening to an hour and 10 minutes, and now I finally have something to say. But it's too late. It's fine.
I'd like to thank everyone for including me, and letting me sit in the back and listen.
You're welcome.
Listen some more next week, or Thursday, right?
Yeah,
We're on again.
Yeah.
A quick note, which if it ends up happening, I'll post to everybody. I have a visit at an eye doctor's sometime soon, which may involve a surgical procedure. And so if that happens, then I may be out of order for a couple of days, which means there will be a short hiatus of the show. But I'll make sure to let everyone know ahead of time in case that comes up.
You'll let us know.
Yeah.
All right.
In case I disappeared, don't think that I've died or that anything's gone wrong. That would be the reason.
Okay.
All
Good
right.
to know.
All right. Thanks for being here, everyone. Take care. Have a great day. See you
See you
Thursday.
guys.